Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Well, we've done it again. Launched another viral global meme. Stacy Herbert.
Max, first there was GI Bo, then there was Crash JP Morgan buy silver, and now there is David Cameron STFU.
Incredible. This has gone global. Tell us more.
Well, first let's look at this headline here from Nicolas Sarkozy tells David Cameron, shut up over the euro. He bluntly told Cameron, apparently at some staged event for the Eurozone crisis, and he said, you have lost a good opportunity to shut up and stop talking about the euro. But I want to turn back to 2 months ago, this little clip here that has been turned into a music video from Keiser Report.
STFU. STFU, David Cameron. STFU. STFU, David Cameron. Because you're completely off base here. That is a snappy tune. And, you know, the thing about it, Stacy Herbert, is that David Cameron is just an easy guy to kick, you know, because he has that look of a suppository, doesn't he? And he just mouths these platitudes and this anodyne claptrap down there in the House of Commons. And, you know, he just has a big fish on the back of his shirt, like on April Fool's Day, like, kick me, kick me. He's just begging to be kicked.
And how are these not clowns running the world? And I have another headline here to show that every time these clowns meet, they get into all sorts of buffoonery. Spat erupts between France, Italy over Binny Smaggy ECB seat. Well, yeah, apparently Berlusconi's mates don't want to leave the ECB, even though they promised Sarkozy that if he supported Mario Draghi as the head of the ECB, that he could put one of his French buddies in there into one of these cushy civil servant jobs that get to dictate to the world where our economic policies will be. Well, apparently now this guy, Binny Smaggy, won't leave. So anyway, Berlusconi ended up saying, at a certain point, I asked Sarkozy, what should I do? Kill him?
Nice. Well, you know, I was rereading the Currency Wars book by James R. Rickards, and he makes a fantastic...
James G. Rickards.
Yeah, and he makes a fantastic point, James G. Rickards. Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That the relationship between France and Italy in the cross-sovereign wealth bond race to see who's the most vulnerable is between France and Italy. Apparently, France owns $500 billion in Italian sovereign debt. So as you see this unwinding of the Eurozone, and all these banks are collapsing in the Eurozone because of their overextension, buying each other's debt in this huge Ponzi scheme, this huge daisy chain of fraud. That one relationship, if that blows, that's really the most spectacular, is the France-Italy.
Well, that's a good point, Max, because they're fighting over who should be running the ECB. And the ECB is the one doling out on behalf of the taxpayers, mostly of Germany, but all of Europe, the bailout funds for the banks of certain countries, favored countries. So I guess maybe Sarkozy and Berlusconi are fighting over which banks, which national banks. Is it going to be BNP Paribas and SocGen in France, or is it going to be Unicredit that gets the ultimate bailout from the EFSF?
Yeah, and if I may digress again, briefly, I was listening to Ben Davies, who's been a guest on our show. He was being interviewed by Eric King over there at King World News. And he was talking about the European facility, this new fund. They're ramping it up. They're inflating the balloon by creating this wraparound insurance product, which is similar to the monoline insurance industry in the United States, which famously blew up just before the 2007-2008 crisis. So what they're doing is they are creating another tranche of tens of trillions, probably hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of completely unpayable insurance, fake virtual insurance products that they are going to collateralize the 1 or 2 trillion in new credit facility, and then say that it's good for 20 or 30 trillion based on the 30 trillion in insurance that they just wrote. Like, here's 30 trillion in insurance. That's about as valuable as that is, as we saw from the 2007 to 2008 period. So this is a hologram wrapped in a chimera, inserted into an illusion.
Well, it's all at the heart of it right now is Greece, of course. And because we only have clowns at the center, look at this headline, Max. Is Greece a failed state? And I want to answer that from Riot Granny. In this image here, you see Riot Granny? Well, I think she's saying, no, Greece is not a failed state. It's an occupied state. Because they're not asking this question about Iceland, are they?
No, no. Because Iceland stood up to the bankers. Whereas Greece is still being subjugated by the tyranny of the bankers. And this granny here, who you see throwing rocks to police, she's a good emblem for what the cops have in store for them and the politicians in Greece. As the things heat up in Greece, hopefully the banks in Greece will completely collapse, and this will be the only saving grace for Greek sovereignty.
Well, this granny is throwing rocks at the police because not only has her pension fund been depleted by the bankers in Italy and France, but joblessness is particularly hammering Greek youth. An astounding 42% of people between the ages of 15 and 24 are without work, double the level from 3 years ago before the Troika came to rescue the people of Greece.
No, well, they are consigning this whole generation to the dustbin of history, basically. They want to push them onto reservations. This is the model. They hope that these people become drug addicts and kill themselves. That's the Papandreou solution to the unemployment problem, the final solution. Hey, where have I heard that before?
And, you know, you mentioned all of this fake debt and leverage that is one of the solutions being offered up. But in the article they say, meanwhile, worries are spiraling that Greece may eventually default. Indeed, some experts believe default is inevitable.
They've already defaulted, but they're maintaining an illusion that they haven't defaulted, and they're using that time period between recognition and reality to impose austerity measures and to steal all the assets and to destroy Greek sovereignty.
And then, Max, also from Greece, this is from a football game this past weekend, hashtag #toe_pano from Greece. And you see this big banner hanging across there. It says, corrupt politicians ensconced parliament, you will drown under the anger of the uprising. So I was tweeted this at Stacy Herbert. You can tweet me there.
Oh, you're trying to beat me on Twitter. You're trying to get more followers than I on Twitter.
So after the soccer game, apparently, the police started searching vehicles leaving the soccer stadium to find who posted this banner. Riot police also came, and once they had identified the vehicle carrying the banner, they started beating people randomly. The police finally arrested the passengers of the vehicle carrying the banner without giving a reason for their arrest. The hashtag #ToPano means the banner in Greek.
Well, this is an interesting development in the information war because they're using the mass media that does pay attention to a football game to put a subliminal message on television, which gets picked up by Twitter that uses the hashtag nomenclature to communicate to the global masses, which then fed back into a police action. So I see this as a very encouraging sign.
That's right. Now, Max, I also started at the top of the show, I mentioned Gaddafi being killed. Now, here's some post-mortem propaganda, how convenient it is for him to be disposed of. Gaddafi, worth more than Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Carlos Slim combined. Yes, you 99%. America and NATO are acting on your behalf, getting rid of the top 1%.
Well, this is where Gaddafi got it wrong. You know, he should have simply opened a bank because that $200 billion is Tier 1 capital. This is the highest grade capital he can have. He could have leveraged that by 10 to 20 times and created a bank facility large enough to buy J.P. Morgan, buy Goldman Sachs, buy Berkshire Hathaway, and fired all those crooks.
Yeah, but it's also propaganda because look at this. They're saying, according to the article, most of the money of that $200 billion was under the name of government institutions such as the Central Bank of Libya, the Libyan Investment Authority, the Libyan Foreign Bank, the Libyan National Oil Corporation, and the Libya African Investment Portfolio. So it was national wealth, it was in national institutions, but they're adding it to his wealth.
Yeah. Well, that's correct. And this is where, again, Gaddafi could have simply, instead of allowing Tony Blair to come in to advise him how to invest this money, as he did, which was the start of his downfall because he let a true terrorist in the country, Tony Blair, he should have really just picked up a book by somebody who knows what they're talking about and figured out that he could have leveraged the sovereign wealth fund of Libya to 10 to 20 times its size and taken over all these crooked banks in the West and, you know, basically done a leveraged buyout of the West. That would have been great for Africa.
Yeah, but this is the thing, Max, is like we are run in the West by debt addicts because they're looking at this and saying, oh my God, Gaddafi had $200 billion in cash. That's $30,000 per citizen. Well, look at the U.S. We have only debt per citizen. Is it any different that our military-industrial complex and our financial-industrial complex and our prison-industrial complex and our drug war complex has added, what, it's like $300,000 in debt per U.S. citizen? That means their futures are collateralized and sold already. At least the Libyan people can just chop off the head of their dictator and take the cash.
Well, Stacy Herbert, this gets back to the war of savers versus speculators. Gaddafi was a saver. He had stuff. He had cash. He also, let's be honest, Sharia law favors banking activity. He
had banned Sharia law, and it's now been reintroduced by the National Transition Council.
Really? How did he make so much money?
It was just from the oil. They have light sweet crude. Why do you think we're in there, Max?
Okay, so he had oil. Yeah, now they've got Sharia law, right? They're banning predatory lending. They're banning usury. And this sets up, you know, ultimately the conflict between Libya, Muslim, Islam, and the West is this propensity in Islam not to give in to Ponzi schemes.
Well, and speaking of Ponzi schemes, under Colonel Gaddafi, they were partially occupied in Libya by J.P. Morgan. And I want to show you this little video I made of a screen grab from jpmorgan.com this past weekend. When you see here, they were occupied by some shouting protesters with some funny little banners there.
Yes, well, the Occupy movement, which is, you know, come in the wake of the global insurrection against banker occupation. The chapter in London, Occupy London, is now merging or getting together with UK Uncut to stage an event. So you see now that they're starting to be exactly what I said must happen. There needs to be economies of scale have to kick in. These groups have to figure out ways how they can act together to leverage their global presence. Ultimately, they will all come together.
And they are in the Occupy Money movement.
Right.
Somebody has started the Occupy Money, pay with silver to beat the banks. They're saying stop using dollars and use silver.
Right. All the Occupy movements are heading toward Occupy Money and using silver instead. Thank you, Stacy Herbert.
Thank you, Max.
Stay there. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Max Keiser. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Time now to go to New York and speak with the Thomas Jefferson of the Internet, John Perry Barlow. Barlow is an essayist, songwriter, founding member of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He was also a rancher for nearly 20 years. John Perry Barlow, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Howdy. How are you?
All right. John Perry Barlow, you were on Crosstalk recently, this week, talking about Occupy Wall Street. And I want to follow up, specifically on the group called Anonymous. Not many people talk about their involvement, but what do you think of Anonymous as an activist group?
I think it's a very interesting and new form of activist group. I mean, they are anonymous, even though I have an awful lot of discourse with them or it. I haven't actually physically met any of them. And at the same time, I find that they are showing admirable restraint given who they are, as far as I can tell, and how they feel about things. I think they're a hugely supportive force for the Occupy movement, and I think that they're ready, willing, and able to punish institutions that they, I think, legitimately feel are overreaching. So far, they haven't been engaging in the sorts of things that scare those institutions, which would be wanton vandalism or completely unjustified assault.
All right, John Perry Barlow, we're seeing something, I guess you could call it financial activism. It's something new, I think, especially in this day of the internet and interconnectedness in the global economy. And we're seeing it with things like people pulling money out of the bank. We saw this in France a few months ago. People, again, are talking about pulling money out of certain banks. People are talking about, we had a campaign, Crash JP Morgan, buy silver, for example, as a way to decapitalize a lot of the derivatives that make up the balance sheets of these banks. Is financial activism, is this something that the people at the Occupy Wall Street, who are certainly sitting there in front of the stock exchange, do they have enough of a grounding in how these things work to launch a financial campaign? Does it matter? I guess my question is, they're sitting there in front of the New York Stock Exchange. So how do they leverage what they believe into something that's going to affect the floor of the New York Stock Exchange?
I mean, look, most of the people in the Occupy movement are broke. In fact, an awful lot of people are broke, and if the folks that are upset about the banks all withdrew their money, it wouldn't change things a great deal. What has to happen is that the people who are in the 1% have to develop an awareness of the unhealthiness of the current financial structure and start to make decisions with the money that they have, that they've amassed. And I think that's starting to happen. I was riding on an airplane day before yesterday with a guy who is on the board of directors of one of the big pharma companies, and you would think a natural enemy. And he said something very interesting. He said, I am very concerned about the concentration of wealth, even though I'm part of the problem. And I don't know what to do about it from my position. I feel like a single cell inside a tumor. I mean, one cancer cell can't change the whole tumor. I think if enough of those cancer cells start to change the tumor, then we can address this. But the first order of business is that everybody start to understand the extent to which there is this plutocratic concentration, so that we can collectively, as a society, do something about it.
That's never going to happen. You know, I worked on Wall Street for many years. The mentality there is pathological, and it's never going to give anything back. And of course, throughout history...
I'm not counting on their conscience. I'm counting on their sense of practicality. I mean, you know, if they start to feel like the banks are not safe, are not supported, they're going to put their money someplace else. They're going to change the things that they do. I'm not counting on there being anything but sociopaths down there.
No, understood. But you know, faced with similar circumstances in the past, for example, let's say Gandhi in India, you know, classically taking the poverty-stricken Indians who had no money, but he figured out that if you could turn a boycott and do it strategically, you could take down an empire. Martin Luther King, similarly, you boycott the buses, you change the dynamic of the political and economic what's going on in that region. So the boycotters have no money. The psychopaths that run the show have no morals. And I would also posit that they border on suicide banking, where they are willing to kill themselves with their practices. So you can't even rely on them being rational in any sense of the word. So what can the Occupy movement do, taking advantage of the economies of their size of their movement, something along that boycott path that's going to push back in some meaningful way? If you have any thoughts on this, John.
I don't think we know that yet. I mean, one of the things that the Occupy movement is being wise in doing is not suddenly grabbing onto some ideological solution for a problem we don't yet know how to solve. The first order of business is that as many people and institutions as possible recognize that it is a problem, fundamentally an illness, that what we have here is a cancer on the economy that has to get dealt with by everybody. And then I think that we can start to put in the fine-grained correctives and regulatory measures and those kinds of things that will make a difference. I mean, I think it's a very difficult problem to solve. But the first order of business, as I say, is to recognize that we have it in the first place.
In London, it's just been reported that one group, UK Uncut, that's been very active in pushing back against predatory corporations in the UK, is now joining forces with Occupy London to launch a campaign. Do you see a future in having groups come together across the spectrum to increase their size?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the problems that we've got with the Occupy movement right now is that it's somewhat monochromatic. It's a little too young, it's a little too long-haired, it's a little too academic in the humanities. It's, you know, it doesn't have enough guys with thick necks and broad arms. It doesn't have enough of the ordinary folks that are in real trouble. And one of the biggest things that has to happen, that really important thing that has to happen, is we have to figure out some way to help the folks understand who are in that you know, what they call the 53%, the lower middle class, people who are paying taxes and are actually directly serving the 1% and the concentration of wealth in their practices, that it is not sufficient for them to just be above the bottom rung. Because, I mean, I think that the story that's been sold by Fox and other networks abroad is that, you know, the important thing is for you to keep the lower class below you, and not to come up with a way to spread the economic wealth throughout the society. It's simply toxic for an economy to have this kind of concentration. The whole infrastructure starts to fail, and that's what's going on here very rapidly.
All right, John Perry Barlow, you're also on the board of directors of the Electronic Freedom Frontier, and you're one of the organizers of that. This came around at about the same time as an explosion in open source software, the collaborative efforts online, where people were working together not for pay, not in any capitalist sense of the word, but to create a better environment, to create a better digital environment. There was a self-interest in creating a better environment against the opposing view of things, which I guess you could say was more of the Microsoft view of things. But this open source mentality, which is really digital, really purely online in nature, can this spill over into the general economy in some way in people's day-to-day lives?
Oh, I think it already has in quite a few ways. You know, it's not a matter of not getting paid, it's a matter of how you get paid and how you think of value. The problem is that we have trended toward a society where value is only measured in the things that you can count, and primarily monetary things. The internet got built by people who were willing to retrieve their value in a lot of more intangible ways. And I wouldn't say that the open source movement was about not getting paid. It was about getting paid in the environment, but it was also about getting paid later for what you were doing for free today. It's kind of like the way in which the Grateful Dead, for whom I wrote songs for many years, recognized that if we gave our songs away, that would be great marketing. So we ended up, you know, for quite a while, the most popular performing band in the United States, in spite of the fact that we let everybody tape our concerts. We essentially were inventing viral marketing in the music business. The same thing applies in the open source movement in general.
Okay, so John Perry Barlow, you wouldn't call yourself anti-capitalist at the Grateful Dead, would you? So therefore, why do people call this movement anti-capitalist? It doesn't seem to fit.
Well, I think that the problem is that we have very loaded terms when we say capitalist or say communist. There are ways in which the internet, the real economy of the internet, has been communist-like from the very beginning, but I wouldn't use that term just because it immediately summons up the Soviet Union and Leninism and Stalinism and Maoism and all of the misuses of Marxism. I actually think that there are, at the heart of Marxism, you will find the evolutionary processes that are actually coming to bear on the internet, where property is increasingly considered the wrong way to mediate human economic interaction, where people know that it's about service, it's not about ownership, and people recognize that they are the means of production themselves. You know, I see things within the Occupy movement and cultural manifestations out in the general population, whether it's Burning Man or the festival culture, where people of the younger generation are much more into sharing than they have been in the past, much more into recognizing that there are many values that can't be measured entirely monetarily. And I think, you know, those evolutionary processes are slow, but they're taking place. Capitalism is just the operation of a free market, and I think that free markets are great, but we've been selling this free market notion in the United States anyway as the be-all and the end-all solution, and it is, I would say, a natural system that works very well as long as it's a free market. But the problem is that free markets only exist until you have the monopolistic concentration that naturally comes out of a completely unregulated free market. And then you don't have a free market anymore. Then the monopoly controls the market. So what we have to do is to figure out ways to stop the monopoly so that the market actually is free.
Right, so this is really about when the very phrase itself, too big to fail, implies a monopoly position and a concentration of wealth that's inconsistent with the free market approach. So people who call this anti-capitalist are really missing the boat. All right, John Perry Barlow, I'd like to go on, but that's all the time we have. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Yeah, happy to be here.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, John Perry Barlow. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at twitter.com/Max Keiser or Stacy Herbert at /Stacy Herbert. Or you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Keiser Report. If you want to send me an email, please do so at KeiserReport at rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.